Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of I'm Here Too, Writing Our Lives, a conversation with Heather Lanier. Heather is an essayist, memoirist, poet, professor, and TED speaker whose talk, Good and Bad Are Incomplete Stories We Tell Ourselves, has been viewed over 3 million times and translated into 18 languages. I had the good fortune of meeting Heather back in 2009 when we were roommates at the Breadloaf Writers Conference. It was great to catch up and talk about a number of things, including writing and spirituality, staying attuned to our dreams, making space for more honest emotions, including vulnerability, grief, and joy, finding community and connection with other writers, and the challenges of writing about the people closest to us. And make sure you stick around for the lightning round, where Heather reveals the secrets to thrifting, among other interesting facts. If you're a writer, a reader, or someone who's just looking to build connection in an ever-changing world, then stay tuned, because I really think you're going to like this conversation. Off we go. Enjoy. Heather, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's really amazing to see you.
I know how it's been. I was looking, I think it was 2009 when we were at Breadloaf together,
That
right?
sounds right. So that would be 16 years ago. Is that the math?
The math is mathing, I think. Almost 20 years, almost 2 decades.
No.
Um,
Yeah, wow. Amazing.
yeah, so there's been so much. So I am excited to have this conversation. One, because I love talking to fellow writers, but also because one of the things that prompted me to actually reach out to you after so many years was you recently posted on social media and you said, years ago, I realized that my writing life and my spiritual life were not separate. That writing, even when I wrote nothing overtly spiritual, was still a spiritual practice, keeping me attuned to my dreams and my subconscious and the guidance of something bigger than me. First of all, beautiful articulation of an intersection. And I'm really curious about how you make it work, writing and spirituality as intentional parts of your life. And I'm also wondering if the pursuit of purpose or the identification plays a role in that.
Oh, what do you mean the pursuit of purpose?
So the idea, like, first of all, I guess that's an assumption I'm making. Like, how do you think about purpose-driven lives, or does purpose play a role in how you think about being?
I don't know. I don't know about I've never read The Purpose-Driven Life. I don't I
I
don't
haven't either. I haven't
no.
either. So I'm just using lowercase p. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah,
are we
yeah.
all here for?
Yeah, well, I think I'll think about I mean, how do I think there were times in my life where I mean, I've always been a writer. I've always written, always righted. Yeah, that's how I say it. I've always been a writer even as a kid. And then, when I started to like write for some kind of attempt to publish things, writing became like a thing to also then accomplish. Meanwhile, I was also, and this would be like early 20s, so it was like teaching as a high school teacher, but also wanting to go to graduate school and learn how to be a writer and try to figure out how to publish things. And also, I was spiritually engaged. So at the time, was like a daily meditator and was really most resonant with Buddhist philosophy. And so those two parts of my life were kind of on separate tracks, I think, for a little bit, or maybe not. Maybe I was always writing spiritually, but it felt like, on the one hand, writing is something you achieve. And on the other hand, there's this other thing, this spiritual practice that I'm attempting to like decrease the suffering of being human. Like what do you do with the human condition is the question of any good religion. Like what do we do about all this pain? What do we do about all our fixations and our egoic needs? So writing kind of was like another, sometimes it felt like another egoic need, like a thing to achieve. And sometimes it still can be a trap I fall into where like much less now that I'm in my 40s, it feels like it's much less interesting to seek accolades. But there was a point at which, I'm not sure when, maybe early 30s or maybe before that, probably early 30s, where I realized that my spiritual practice was central, and writing was just an extension of that. And so I actually like order my day intentionally so that my meditation is first and then the writing is second. And I know that some people write first, like they do their morning pages, but I've never wanted to hear like the garbage stream of consciousness of my own mind the first thing. Like I don't want to listen to her at 6 or 7 in the morning. I want to just open up to a reality that's bigger than my small self. Um, so yeah, I don't know. That's like riffing on some of those things. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think and then the writing then is different. Like what comes from writing when it's second, when it's an extension of my spiritual practice, which is again to like, try to surrender to something bigger than I am. Then the writing becomes a surrender of that too. And whatever gets written, sometimes it could quote sell in the marketplace, which for a poem means it got picked up by a literary journal that has a circulation of 200. It's like woohoo. Or it might be that I sold a memoir, which I sold the one memoir that I worked on as about being a mother. Um, or it might mean that like I'm just sort of spiraling inside poems that never need to see the light of day, that are really exist for me to work something out, or an essay that doesn't get finished. It's just kind of abandoned because something else took over. So I don't know, just like being open to what comes, and knowing that, and this kind of comes from, I think this probably comes from just parenting my daughter Fiona. Like the culture's yardsticks for value are not particularly rewarding ultimately, and they only really feed the ego or make you feel shitty when you don't measure them or meet them. But there are these other yardsticks, these other ways of measuring value, that I think are transcendent. So it's about like meaning and joy, and if you follow the Christian tradition, it's like the fruits of the spirit, generosity, or grace or kindness, or uh, things like that. So those can be good measures of one's work. Like, did it make me a better person in the end? Does it feel good? Does it feel life giving to like make this thing?
Yeah. I want to stick with inherent value because you wrote this beautiful essay in 2021 called Out There I Have to Smile, and you're exploring the pressure to be happy. And this is a bit that struck me, and listeners, I'm going to be quoting a lot of Heather's writing because I think it's amazing. So, Heather, I'm going to try to do my justice when I'm reading it out loud. But essentially, this is what struck me. I tried to write a book that showed my daughter's inherent value and our culture's denial of it, whether she was happy or not. I ended up writing a book about what it means to be human. This belief in the virtue of the happy and suffering free life sterilizes and shrinks us, I wrote toward the end, minimizing what makes us most beautifully human: our tenderness, our vulnerability, the profundity of our capacity for heartache, the risks of which deliver us into immense joy. What I tried to do was show honestly, the joy and the grief, the hard and the beautiful, and say it all belongs. Okay, so first, thank you so much for those words.
Thank
But
you.
as we dive into it, there was a phrase going around, again, sort of early 2020s, where people were saying it's okay not to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And while I appreciated the sentiment, even though it was out there, I still found myself struggling with being able to experience and express, maybe more importantly, express a more honest range of emotions. And so I guess I'm just curious, how do we remind ourselves that it all belongs?
Oh, that's a great question. It's so wild to hear you read stuff that when you back, because I could identify that I wrote it, but it does feel both long ago, but also it's like it's hard to sometimes remember what you wrote. So how do we see that it all belongs? I really don't know. I mean, I guess writing always helps me figure out how to hold space for everything. In a given day, I think it was the other day, I think I was listening to a podcast where someone was like, make sure you feel all your feelings, or they were saying how often they run away from their feelings. And I thought to myself, oh, yeah, I don't do that. I feel all my feelings. I don't run away from any of them. And then, like an hour or two later, there was like some sort of uncomfortable thing that I can't remember the specifics, but there was a little bit of tension that creeped up that I literally could not feel in that given moment. And I felt myself like just move away from it. Um, and then I was able to, I guess, just realize like, oh, you definitely don't feel all your feelings. How could you? How could we? How could we? How could anybody just constantly be like, yes, all of it's okay all the time? You have to sort of compartmentalize or move ahead. Especially for me as a parent, my kids do not need to see exactly how I'm feeling at any given moment. I hope to God that they never quite fully know. So I don't know. I think it probably takes time and space, for me, at least as an introvert. It takes like pulling away from the world and like actually kind of going back and reflecting on what happened today and like what did I actually have to serve stuff down? What did I have to repurpose for some reason? What did I have to ignore? Um, so that means that I feel like I'm not the kind of person who can like constantly be with people all the time. My neighbor, my beloved friend, is like, oh, I can be with people pretty much all the time. I never need alone time. And I was actually walking with two friends, and they both agreed that they don't actually really need alone time. So I don't know how those folks do it, but for me, in order to feel everything or to feel like it is all okay, it all belongs, I need some private space and then some public space or some, yeah, company time and solitude.
Yeah, I very much identify as a fellow introvert. Um, and I actually am thinking about how we met. I know we mentioned at the very beginning we were at Breadloaf, a writers' conference,
Yeah,
but we were actually roommates.
yeah, yeah. You're like the
And
best roommate I ever had, Era. It was like instant friendship. Instant. I was like, this is the best. I've never had a better roommate before.
I won't tell
Yeah.
Jess.
Oh, well, yeah, and a better roommate that I didn't marry. But that conference too, remember, it was so long. Like it was like day 7 and we were like, we're still here. It's like this thing's going on forever. Because I think Bread Loaf's like 11 or 12 days. Is that it?
It's less than 3 weeks, but it feels like a lifetime.
It's so long. So anyway, yeah, we were roommates.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering because I hadn't really thought about that time until I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to Heather. I wonder
Yeah,
like what was Ara and what were we like in 2009? And
we
I
were
was
awesome. We
we
were
were
we were awesome. Mhm.
we continue to be. Um, but I was reading some of the emails that we exchanged with each other and then with some of our other fellow bread loafers. I don't know what we call each other, but
Yeah.
and I was really struck by how much encouragement and support that we were able to lend one another. And it wasn't just about writing stuff, it was life stuff, it was writing stuff, it was writing plus life stuff. And I guess
Mm.
I'm just curious for you now, do you still have a community of writers? Do you seek that out as part of your practice?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's so helpful when you have people, right, that you can share in the struggles and the like triumphs of writing. Less now. I don't so much have people that I share my work with as much anymore. I find that a lot of times the writers I befriend, we just work in such different genres. My friend and colleague at the university I teach at is a genre fiction writer, and I have no idea what makes a good mystery novel. And I'm like a braided essayist, and so we don't share our work. But and then another friend of ours is working on something very different from both of us. But we meet like once a month to just talk about what's going on, how we're making space for writing, how that's going, and then just like one of us sort of writes down like what are we thinking about for for the next month, so that we do like a check-in the following month. Like, okay, last month you were trying to figure out where you were going to write, did you figure that out? Or you were thinking about how to finish this poem or whatever. So yeah, that's been really fun. Sometimes I run into trouble where I actually need someone to read something. Like I don't know what's going on with a piece, or I don't know how it reads. And then I'll seek out people, but those people are usually people who live far from me. So we might just email back and forth, about a piece, and we'll just like do a swap, or I'll give someone something and they'll say, okay, I'll give you something later, in a couple of months when I have something. But I absolutely need, yeah, every writer needs, I think, community, or at least I've always needed that. And then I teach at a university where I'm making community for people. So I teach undergraduate classes, and those students are sometimes new to this idea of writing community. And then I teach at graduate courses, and those MA students they're like, yeah, they're really seeking support. So it's so helpful to talk about it. Writing is such a funny, solitary act. So it's helpful to have people.
Yeah, it is. You mentioned earlier that you've sort of always been writing, but you
Yeah.
also have some formal education as a writer. So how did you think about, I'm always writing, this is sort of part of who I am, and then the formal education piece of it? Like, how did you think about that trajectory?
Um, I I saw getting a graduate degree as like getting paid to do the very thing I wanted to do, because I made a commitment to, I mean, I couldn't afford graduate school unless I was going to get at least covered, the tuition covered, and live on a stipend. So I only applied to places that had that kind of financial setup. And now there are so many more graduate schools, but yeah, I just saw it as like a chance to live on. At the time, it was $1,200 a month. My rent was $350 or something like that in Columbus, Ohio, and so I had $900 left over for food. And I remember the month that really needed a vacuum cleaner because mine broke or something, and it was $75 at Target. And I was like, well, that's it. That's the budget. But I was like, I was writing, and I was taking classes and trying to figure out what makes something good, or how to write in a way that moves people. So it was that I got my MFA at Ohio State University. It was 3 years, and to me it just bought me time to like devote to this thing I love so much. And meet other people too. So those people are still members of my community. So some of those folks are people that I reach out to ask for feedback, or do a panel with or something.
Um, I want to flip to the teaching part of it because when I was prepping to talk to you and finding out what happened since 2009, I went to your website and I loved this little bit of biographical information. So it says Heather has taught Shakespeare to ninth graders in Baltimore, conversational English to housewives, ship workers, and executives in Japan, and expository and creative writing to undergraduates at places such as UC Berkeley, Miami University, and Southern Vermont College. I'm really curious. What have you learned about yourself through these various experiences spanning geography, life stages, and God knows what other dimensions?
Well, there's something that I realized recently is, so my partner and I, my husband Justin and I, have moved around quite a lot, and part of that is just like making sure everyone got the degrees they needed to do the thing that they wanted to do. So there was, and then also just getting work that was, helping support our family, or like paying for our lives. Sometimes that required some moving. And so the thing about moving is, everything changes. You move every 5 years or so, and even the grocery store is called something else. It's called Price Chopper, or it's called Hannaford's, or Safeway. But now that we've stayed put in New Jersey, it's the first time where I'm realizing things actually change even when you don't move at all, which is a very weird phenomenon. I think you're probably trying to ask me like a deep question about teaching and, and how it affects me. But really, I was just so struck that like I walked around my neighborhood this fall in September, and these little kids, these like 3-year-olds, were going to the school down the street where my kids used to go. And I didn't have any little people to drop off anymore. but I still lived in the same house I've lived in for this is like our seventh year. So I just realized like, oh, things don't just change because you constantly change, like you constantly up and change everything. Things actually change even if you stay put, which is, like a pretty basic Buddhist principle about like everything is changing. And that always strikes me. Those kinds of things are surprising to me. So, yeah, I think I just, we've definitely like, we've been through a lot of, having to like adjust and readjust. And that gets really tiring, but it turns out you have to keep adjusting even if you stay put.
Yeah, I mean, and you're staying put as a professor. You recently got tenure. Congratulations on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Um, how has your teaching style evolved?
Oh, let's see. I don't know how much it's evolved. A lot of what I do is sometimes the university asks for like applications in innovative instruction. And I'm like, I'm not sure how innovative writing teaching is. I mean, it's like we read each other's work and then we talk about it, and that feels really meaningful. But I'm not like taking someone into a laboratory or like setting off rockets outside. So the structure of teaching pedagogy is similar, which is like um, we do a lot of low stakes writing activities in class. We read some stuff and talk about it. And then I give them assignments and invite them to experiment and try things out. My pedagogical philosophy is feminist in origin. So, like, I consider the student to be the expert of their own lived experience, and that I'm like teasing out this like collective dynamic among us rather than me lecturing at students and like being the knowledge holder and like imparting all the experience that I have and all the expertise I have. It's more of like I'm trying to foster a community where everyone feels comfortable stepping into their into their own knowledge and express that, but also be open to other people's as well as my own. So I try to say like I'm the most experienced writer in the room, but then I often talk about the difficulties I have writing are very similar to the ones I had 20 years ago. You're like bump into fear, you bump into not writer's block so much, but you know, like, oh, I'm writing something new that I've never written before. How do I work with that? What do I do to learn about that? Whatever it is, it's always the same stuff. It's always the same problem. It's just that I have more experience knowing that writing can be really uncomfortable. A lot of times new writers, younger writers or novice writers think they're not good because writing is hard. So they're like, "Oh, I'm not good at it because it was hard." And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's hard for all of us. I think it just gets harder, actually. It's just that you get more and more comfortable. It's like marathon running. It's like you go for a 2 mile run and it's hard for anybody who doesn't run. But then if you go for a 10 mile run and you're used to those 2 and 5 miles, it's still really hard. Like 10 miles is really hard. Writing is like that too. It's just hard.
One of the things that kind of has stuck with me from Bread Loaf was one of the teachers there said, there are things that writers have to work on, and there are things that come to you more naturally. And I know that that's like everything in life, but it really,
Yeah.
because when you're writing, as you said, like there are things that just feel like you are actively putting every single, character on a page. And are there things for you as a writer that come more naturally than others? Like what's the stuff you don't have to pay attention to?
Oh, I think I feel probably have to pay attention to everything. The place where I had a poetry professor who once said, everyone kind of needs to know what's the parachute that they launch before they're going to hit the ground to save themselves from saying the thing that they really should be saying. Um, and so the parachute is actually not a good thing in this metaphor. It's the thing that's like, you keep saving yourself. It's the easy thing. It's the thing you throw up to like, because you don't know how to get out of a poem or an essay. For a long time, my parachute was just like pretty language. It was like, well, I like the way this sounds, or there's no plot here. But I mean, most of my fiction attempts in my 20s were like people sitting and thinking pretty thoughts. So I've grown to appreciate writers who like can really rely on plainer style and and do a lot with a more direct style. And I've grown to be wary sometimes of like uh, hiding an absence of content behind a lot of metaphors or something. Um, but let's see. I mean, I think I don't know. A project for me usually begins with some kind of obsession. Like for an essay, which is what I most do, it's like some sort of question or constellation of issues and images that I know are kind of knotted up together, and then I start to write them out in sections. I start to write out like a scene that I know is connected, and then I try to keep writing around that. The I think the thing that's I constantly have to probably do what everyone else does, which is like make sure that I'm not writing a piece that's selling itself short, where it's like, okay, it's done, it's good enough, but really there's like a lot more that that piece could say. Or I've pulled the parachute too quickly in terms of meaning. Like I've been like, this is good, this meaning is good, this meaning is deep enough, this is like going far enough. And sometimes, the problem is that you just haven't been able to sit long enough with a piece, or you haven't challenged yourself to ask a question under the question, or you just need readers. So, I don't know. There's nothing that I can't think of anything that I'm like, oh, I don't have to worry about that. I don't have to think about that. I feel like you have to think about a lot of stuff when you write all at once. And then you can't think about any of it. You have to throw all the knowledge out and just go with your instincts.
And then once it's out, the hardest lesson, and it's been such a great lesson outside of just writing, is once something's out there, you're not with every reader in their ear, like, no, this is what I meant for you to get, right?
Well, you should be. I mean, that seems fair. There should be like a little like those books that grandmas read to their kids. There should just be a voice component, that a voice box in the book that says, "This is what you really should understand about this piece."
Exactly. Here's where you're not getting it. Well, speaking of stories, you're also a TED speaker, and I want to talk about your TED Talk. So you did a TED Talk in 2017. It was called Good and Bad, Our Incomplete Stories We Tell Ourselves. And if you just let me brag about you for a minute, it has been viewed over 3 million times and translated into 18 languages. I want it to be 4 million times. So I'm not going to give too much away for the audience. I want them all to go and watch it. But I do want to talk a little bit about the opening in particular. And I'm going to paraphrase, but
Yeah.
essentially, you begin with an ancient parable about a farmer, right? Who goes through a series of events, some that on their face appear to be good, some that seem to be bad. But unlike his neighbors, who are quick to label the events as good or bad, the farmer has the same refrain for each event. And it's good or bad, hard to say. And in your TED Talk, you share that you see the parable as not about looking on the bright side or wanting to see how things turn out, but really about how we are so eager to label situations. You said to put concrete around it by judging it. And you noted that reality is much more fluid, right? And good and bad are often incomplete stories that we tell ourselves. Um, you also shared that the parable has been your warning that by gripping tightly to the story of good or bad, you're closing down your ability to truly see a situation. You said that you learn more when you proceed and loosen your grip and proceed openly with curiosity and wonder. And then you take us through your experiences with your daughter, Fiona, over the course of 7 years, because 2017, right? It's up through that. I'm really curious about now, right? 2025. What's your relationship to the parable?
So the thing about doing a TED Talk where the refrain is good or bad, hard to say, and it's a whole talk about like not holding on to concepts that, something that happened was bad or something that happened was good. The thing about doing that TED Talk is that if you ever complain to your sister or your friend that like, oh, this is so bad, they'll be like, well, I don't know, good or bad, hard to say. Or like as someone once said in a TED Talk I watched, good or bad, hard to say. And then I'm like, I know, damn it, it's true. So I'm not immune to like, determining things as good or bad. Like that's just like a human response, I think. But it's a helpful parable just to keep in mind, and I don't always keep it in mind. And so it requires like sort of constant returning to like, okay, you think this is good, but maybe it just is, or you think this is bad, but maybe it just is. I think sometimes too, it's lovely to just name something as good. So lately, I don't always use that parable literally. So I will sometimes like, what are the five good things lately? Just as a practice in gratitude. And if I were a person who listened to my own parable every day or my own TED talk, I would be like, well, no, good or bad, hard to say. So I think that that phrase can go maybe can be applied in ways that would be unhelpful, ultimately. But it's helpful when you're like, something feels terrible, or when the Medicare cuts. Let's just like use a policy that's devastating. There's plenty of in the news that's devastating, but like 1 point some trillion dollar cuts to Medicaid and Medicare are bad, are terrible. So but I don't know, maybe there'll be some reversals, or maybe there will be some movement toward good. Um, that just sort of like keep open that no no newspaper headline is final, actually. Like next month is a whole new set of newspaper headlines for days. Next year, in 5 years, like how will we respond to what feels like the destruction of democracy? I think some things are legitimately bad, but also the story doesn't have to end. So that's, I think, right now in 2025, that's how I've been applying that parable.
Yeah, super helpful. Um, I mentioned Justin earlier, and you're the roommate you married, who's a great roommate. And I love getting glimpses into your relationship with him, and the space that he occupies more broadly in the world through your writing. So, in your memoir, Raising a Rare Girl, and again, listeners, it's beautiful, and I think everybody should read it. But these are two excerpts that jumped out at me as it relates to Justin. So you wrote, in our decade plus together, Justin and I had mostly figured out how to do this. He let me be messy and emotional and stubborn. I let him be sage, wise, and sassy, and chronically late. You also tell a story about his ordination as an Episcopal priest, and you were unable to attend. Fiona was too small, but you share some wonderful details about it, including this excerpt. But even if I'd been in attendance, I wouldn't have been able to see what is now my favorite detail about the ceremony. Midway through the service, the ordinands, as the soon to be priests are called, lie belly down and touch their foreheads to the ground in full prostration. It's an act of total surrender. The future priests are giving everything they have, their bodies, their minds, their hearts, their souls, to God. Versions of these deep bows appear in several religions. Justin had made similar prostrations in the Zen monastery. So there he was, lying face down on the floor of a church after days of sleep deprivation. The choir was singing an ancient hymn. The bishop would soon put his hands on my husband's head and consecrate his priesthood. For a few short minutes on that church floor, my husband got to take a break. So he closed his eyes and, as he told me hours later, took a little nap. I laughed. You didn't. I wasn't fully asleep, he said. He insisted he was always partly conscious, able to hear what was happening around him. But he said he'd entered the kind of half sleep he'd learned in Tofu Kuji. I feel like you imbue Justin with such a deeply lived in humanity that I was almost fooled into thinking I knew him and his Black meditation cushion. But as you're writing, Justin, are there ways that the writing, I guess, helps you get closer to him? Or conversely, are there ways that you're actively protecting him from your writerly gaze?
I would say no to either. What I am, it's so funny to hear those passages. It's hard. It's very hard for me to write about Justin. I mean, we've been together 25 years. And it's sort of like trying to write about the inside of your body. Like I can't see it. I can't, I sometimes just can't see because it's so immediate, it's so close. Um, so the writing about Justin in that book was teased out hard by my editor because she got glimpses and was like, I think we need to see both of you in this book. So the book is about my daughter Fiona and learning to be her mother, and she has this rare chromosomal syndrome. So he was there too, alongside me and Fiona, as we tried to figure out how to like support her in this world of ableism. And yeah, the editor just felt like she really needed to, or the readers would want to know about both of us as parents, and of course they would. So it was really hard to actually like try to bring him into a full portrait. And I don't think that the writing changed how I saw him at all. um, and I think you're always protecting some things about anybody that you write about. I don't couldn't say that there was like specific things that I did or didn't write about, but probably the person who gets the most protection in that book is my daughter, because I stopped writing about her at age 5, and so there's this very like visceral feeling of separation when I let her go into kindergarten. Like the one of the close to the end scenes is just seeing her walk into an elementary school, a place that 50 years ago or so, 60 years ago, she would have been denied entry because of her disabilities. And so but also a place that has a lot of people in it who would eventually be her peers that would be able to read the blogs and the articles and books I was writing. So I wanted there to be a clear separation that like she was entering her own public life at age 5. At age 5, you've now entered public life, kindergartner. Um, so that was the person I was most protective of. And there are things about Fiona that I didn't write about too much, but I definitely don't write much about her at all anymore. She's 14. Um, yeah, so I don't know. No, I think probably the answer is surprising, which is just it turns out you can deeply love and be intermingled with somebody and actually be really terrible at writing about them, and like really have your editor have to like force it out of you, so that it fleshes out the story and feels like a more complete portrait of your actual life.
I mean, Fiona, I love the picture that you included with her in kindergarten, because throughout you are, I mean, you from the very moment you meet her, her eyes and her ability to connect with people and that sense of humor. And it feels almost, I know this is going to sound obvious because she's your child, but it kind of felt like I could relate to Fiona as her own individual person. But then these snippets of you and Justin that you were giving us, you could see very much reflected back in her, in terms of her love of music or her flashes of, frustration.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I guess I'll ask you the same question. Like, you were getting to know her and she was growing in real time and the world was changing around you. Like, is that something as a memoirist you're just trained to do? Like, how does one write their life when it's so deeply happening?
Yeah, there are certain things that I just have to write about, and so definitely wrestling with her diagnosis, trying to figure out what it meant, having to take her to all these medical appointments. I would come home and just have to write it out, and I think that's how I am. So this earlier this week, I had a medical procedure. It was difficult. It was stressful, and I came home and I wrote it out. Will that ever become an essay or a poem? I don't think so, unless the world wants a colonoscopy poem, which I don't think they do. We'll see. But it was just one of those things. I felt like I just needed to like write down the details in order to move on. And so that happened quite a bit in those first years of Fiona's life, where, especially the first year, we were just getting so much news and recalibrating to a very different landscape of parenting that had been ever explained to me or shown to me. And I think even if my daughter had been a typical kid with the standard issue genetic code, I would still be like, what world am I on? Like, this whole parenting thing is very demanding and surprising. So I probably would have still been writing about it. So it's not like I'm a memoirist, I should therefore go write about my life. It's more like I have to go write about this, and then it ends up being something I want to continue to sort of flesh out for a reader.
How do you protect your energy? Because you did mention being an introvert and your TED Talk, your memoir, at least, right? I'm sure there are other pieces too. Those have drawn huge audiences, and I'm sure people reach out to you all the time. And, the topic is intensely personal, and I'm sure others feel very comforted, right, by your sharing. Like, how do you protect your energy and yourself in all of that?
Mhm. Well, a lot of my energy goes to classes, which is what is how we get our insurance, and health insurance is important. So yeah, I mean, the book came out in 2020, which was the worst time for a book to come out because it was July, and so literally bookstores weren't even open to like receive the copies. So there was some promotion, but it was all in this bubble of the pandemic, right? So I did some interviews or some podcasts and things, which was nice to connect with people, but it actually wasn't a very depleting promotional work because we were all depleted culturally from, trying to stay alive and learn all the many shifting rules of masks and hand washing and waiting for a vaccine and stuff. So it's just like it's a pretty unusual way to have a book come out. Let's see. But now, how do I protect my energy? Some of it's just like make sure that I meditate in the morning and have a little bit of time to write if I can. So try to create a little bit of sort of cushion for kind of checking in with myself and that sense of something bigger, um, and and then kind of use that and move on from there. So then I go teach, or then I, have a podcast interview or something like that. And then Saturdays I take off entirely. That's our like Sabbath day. Um, so, you mentioned Justin being ordained. So he's an Episcopal priest and he works Sunday. So I try to like just make Saturday a day where I loaf around. We watch TV, we, go for walks as a family. Just like refuel basically. So no grading, no teaching, no big events. Sometimes I might scribble away at something, but only if it doesn't feel like work, only if it feels restorative or life-giving in some way.
Okay, so now we've entered the lightning round portion.
Ooh, exciting. Will there
I
be
know,
lightning bolts? Is there like a sound effect? Pew, pew,
I should
pew.
get one.
Okay,
All
we
right.
can make it.
So the first one, you actually talked, maybe because you are a fellow writer, you talked about obsessions. I kind of think about it more in terms of preoccupations, right? This idea of things that we come back to over and over again, the stories we tell ourselves, the story we tell each other.
Yeah.
And, often mine start with I love, I hate, I wish, I've always wondered. Um,
Hmm.
some of mine are very varied. Like I like organized animal crime networks, work life integration, and ancestors. But to the extent you haven't shared, like what's one of your preoccupations?
I think right now I'm really preoccupied with how we could be more of a network in our culture, like how we could need each other more, rely on each other more. And that goes from like policy to like, so like, how could there, I would love for, Medicare to be expanded, not cut. But also like interactions with neighbors. I feel keenly the sense of isolation from the way that we've designed our nuclear families. I think I've heard something like America doesn't have like a social safety net; it has the nuclear family. Some people will say America doesn't have a social safety net; it has women. So I've noticed that over the past several years, I've been writing essays that are about this like myth of independence and this myth of isolation and this real need for interdependence. But that kind of pops up like randomly, and I'm reading over a poem and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is about the same thing. Here's this poem about the same thing, or an essay that I think is actually about this very specific topic, and it turns out these themes of like independence and interdependence are appearing. um, so it's one such obsession. But yeah, I mean, right now I just really want to go thrift store shopping this week, and so thrifting is another very unrelated, uh, what did you call them, preoccupation. I really love rescuing objects from like landfill demise, and being like, this is now precious again because I'm so excited about it. The trick is to not buy a whole bunch of stuff when you go to a thrift store, but like really find the thing that you're like, oh, this is a gem. But you have to restrain yourself a little bit.
Okay.
But
Well, there's a rummage sale. You're in Jersey. There's a rummage sale up by me in Bar Hills this weekend. So
what? Yes, I love.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a great time for garage sales, um, for yard sales. They call them yard sales here, I think. In Vermont, they called them tag sales. And the first time I saw that sign, I literally thought it was a sale of tags. Like I was like, I don't understand why. Who needs tags? But I was just,
Someone
yeah,
somewhere.
it's because I was from the Mid Atlantic. I had no idea. And I
Is that
told them that, and they were like, "No, you didn't." I'm like, "I really did. I really thought they were selling tags."
well, you're in Vermont. What about bear spray? Did you know what bear spray was when you first heard about it?
No, what's that? Oh,
It's a spray that you spray at the bear.
okay.
When we were in Wyoming, they were like, "Yep," and
Instead of
I'm thinking like, "Oh, it's a repellent."
like mosquito spray.
Right,
Yeah.
right, bug spray, right? Bug spray,
Did
bear
you spray
spray.
it yourself?
No, 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 no. Thankfully,
Okay.
they show you, and it looks like an air horn almost. So
Okay.
yeah,
They intervened before you went hardcore on your armpits with the bear spray.
two writers. Yeah, asking for definitional clarity is a survival skill. All right, we're gonna keep the lightning around, even though we don't have the sound effects.
Pew, 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 pew.
Okay, there we go. I'm gonna have to record that. Um, Superpowers. So one of the
Mm.
reasons I love doing this podcast is learning what makes people unique. And like as we've talked about, we all have things that people seek us out for or that we're really good at. What's one of your superpowers?
Oh man, I saw this question because you kindly gave me a rundown, and I didn't come up with an answer. But I do think I can rescue a pretty great cardigan sweater from a thrift store, and that might be my superpower. Or like just an excellent bowl. Like I got this collection of little bowls from a thrift store where like the outside was one pattern and the inside was another pattern. They were very bright. So maybe finding cool stuff from thrift stores. Uh, I don't know. This would be a good question for someone else. This is like one of those, it's really hard to see the inside of your
Right.
world. I can sit with people when they're experiencing emotional distress pretty well. That's a skill. I'm like happy to be there. You having some trouble? I'm happy to sit there and we can talk about it. You can tell me why it sucks. I can listen. I can sit through people's difficult situations for sure.
That is actually a very important superpower.
Mm.
It's not always easy for people. And the curation. I think going into a thrift store for me would be a nightmare. Like I get distracted. Like there's just too much information. It's like, what am I here for? Why am I like so? Your
Hmm.
superpowers are very, very important. I love them.
I think
Um,
it's a hunter gatherer, like it's remnants of hunter gatherer culture. Just like gathering, like looking, foraging. It's very
yeah.
it satisfies. It scratches some kind of deep biological itch that just has to be scratched every now and then.
Have you guys seen Flow, the movie?
No.
It's an animated film and it doesn't have any words, any dialogue, but it's these animals. Essentially, it seems after a huge weather event, and there's a cat and anyway, I think it's a
Yeah.
lemur. I don't know if it's a lemur, a meerkat, something, but it's
Mhm.
constantly got things that it's like putting on the ship that they have, like that
Uh-huh.
they're. So I think that would be your thrift store buddy. So,
Yeah,
oh,
because every superhero needs a side, like a
that's right.
little a creature. What do they call them? Sidekick. Yeah, sidekick.
Sidekick.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, this one is an ask. So part of the podcast is also about community, and you've been one of your preoccupations, but I'm also trying to figure out how do we get together? Like, how do we bring one another together to share and learn and be inspired? And you have already given us so much, not only through this conversation, but the work that you've been doing out in the world. So I want to turn it to the audience. What's something the audience can do for you?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a good question too. Do for me. I can't think of. I mean, I think, you could donate to causes that matter to you. You could donate to causes that matter to me. I donate to ARC, which is an organization that supports people with intellectual disabilities and does good advocacy for um, people like Fiona, my daughter, and has worked really, really hard to stop and now overturn cuts to Medicare. So if you feel like donating to ARC, you could do that. You could go read some stuff I've written if that's interesting to you. And yeah, I'd say if none of those things sound appealing, maybe just see if you can give a little something towards the direction that does feel like it gives some life to your world. So maybe find $5 to give to a different cause, or go introduce yourself to the neighbor that you haven't met yet.
Those are all very actionable and very easy to do. So thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So you've known the audience may not know this, but I'm obsessed with pop culture, and it's hard to get an email from me without some reference to television. But there is a lot of content out there. So whether it's a read, a listen, a watch, like what's something that you're up to that others might enjoy?
Okay, well, I'm reading Natalie Shapiro's poetry collection called Stay Dead, which was just longlisted for some major prize. Natalie was also recently on Jeopardy, and Natalie's a poet I went to graduate school with. So her poems are just really funny and different and interesting and surprising. And so if you haven't picked up any of Natalie Shapiro's work, I recommend. The newest book is called Stay Dead. The thing that I've watched is what everyone watched. We just finished season 1 Stranger Things, and I got pretty into it. But I'm behind everyone else on that one. I have pretty much cut myself off of bad reality TV as a habit, and so I cannot say I'm watching any of it. Although I did watch many hours in my earlier decades and loved all of it. Um, but yeah, right now, just kind of reading the poems. I would recommend the poems.
Love that. Well, if I may ask, what did you cut yourself off of?
Oh, anything. So I don't care. Any reality show where the promise is forever love. So, like, I don't care about it if there's going to be no love potentially at the end. But it has to be like the Bachelor was the original. I always like preferred the Bachelorette over the Bachelor. But those shows, just I stopped being interested. Um, but the Golden Bachelor and Bachelorette, maybe it was the Golden Bachelorette, I can't remember. Yeah, it was. The Golden Bachelorette is a solid program of like senior citizens trying to find love because their egos aren't involved anymore. Like nobody's trying to like make it big when they're 80. They're just literally looking for someone to love for 5 more or 10 more years. So that's one series I actually enjoyed. But I have gone into like, Married at First Sight, Love is Blind. I can't remember what else. Those shows, and I'm like, there's going to be love. It's going to be great. And then, I leave with like a sick feeling in myself, and I'm also like, you just wasted however many weeks of your life. It's good. It was good. COVID. Like when I was literally ill with COVID, I would usually run through a bad season of Married at First Sight, and then felt equally as ill from the show as I did from the illness. So I probably would be a great romance novel reader. I just haven't ventured there yet.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that next time, maybe you will. We'll
Next
see.
time I'll bring you some romance novels.
Can't wait.
I'll get them from
Um,
thrift stores. I'm sure there's many at the thrift stores.
oh, I'm sure there are actually. Um, well, Heather, thank you so much. I really enjoyed one catching up, but also just this has been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right. Well, be well and soon again.
Yeah, you too.
All right. Well, that's all for this episode of I'm Here Too. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation. Please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss the next conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.